do have a fair amount of concern about this. On one hand, I think comparative advantage is a very powerful tool. If I look at coding, programming, which is one area where AI is making the most progress, what we are finding is we are not far from a world, I think we'll be there in 3 to 6 months, where AI is writing 90% of the code.
I saw a post come across X that said something along the lines of $1 billion software company with 1 employee. Totally obsessed with these ideas around hyper efficiency. In the zeitgeist now, you'll start to see these charts of amount of revenue to number of employees being this really compelling metric that some of the most ambitious founders are working towards. And so when I saw this idea of the $1 billion 1-person company, I was intrigued. What if you went AI maxi and you tried to really take a swing at automating every part of a software company? The pitch from the company as they laid it out was they were going to buy existing software businesses of different sizes and scales and industries and try to fully automate every aspect of that software business. And as I clicked through, I saw the founder followed me on X, and so just sent him a message, hey, fascinating, really interesting idea. If you're raising, we should talk. I was set to just meet them for a pitch meeting, and almost as I was rolling over to the meeting said, hey, I've got our cameras with us. Would you be up for recording this? Thankfully, they agreed, and we got a chance to sit down with Alan Wells, the CEO of Rocketable. Alan was wrapping up his time at Y Combinator and starting to put together a round. At the end of the video, you'll see we make a decision that we want to work together. From first meeting to becoming a funder and investor in Rocketable, we were able to turn that around in a week. And hopefully you get a sense for what it's like to pitch us, our decision frameworks that we use. When we move, we're able to move very aggressively. And we hope that, if you fit this profile or if you see the world similarly, that you won't hesitate to reach out and we can talk about whatever it is you're building too. So hope you enjoy this conversation with Alan Wells from Rocketable.
I just started writing about how awesome LLMs are for solo entrepreneurs who are trying to do a lot with a little.
Were you on that journey already with the golf app?
Yeah.
You were? Okay.
Yeah, this was now, I was 10 months-ish into that journey and had seen, 6 months of continuous improvements of models making my life easier in very interesting ways. And I started writing this down. I was like, writing forced me to clarify what was going on and what was kind of the fundamental unlocks behind this thing. Being able to put 100,000 lines of source code into a model that can then digest that thing for you. And if you've just bought an app and you've had 90 minutes of handover with the team that used to run it and that's it, that's a superpower, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
I felt like it gave me that's a superpower feeling in a way that a lot of people hadn't experienced yet. And so I started writing about that. And then I was like, what, if you chart this out, what does this mean? What happens in this future where these superpowers are available and you can run a small software business in a much different way than you used to be able to?
Right.
What if you ran 5 of them or 10 of them? Or 1,000.
That was not in your purview when you bought the first app, right?
When I bought the first app, I wanted to build a small portfolio of cash flow generating software businesses as a small business that I would just kind of shepherd without any automation.
And I was going to say, LLMs were not in the picture at that point.
I was an LLM skeptic 2 years ago.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Why so?
Because I spent 5 years working on self-driving cars, going from kind of early. I was at Uber in 2017. We were building self-driving trucks in this brick building over here.
This one right here?
Yeah, this big brick one.
No
that
way.
was behind that was the self-driving truck garage at Uber. I can show you a picture if you want to see it.
Amazing.
It took 10 years from impressive demo to commercially useful thing. So when LLMs first came out, I was like,
talk to me in 10 years.
I think I've seen this story before. I'm not going to jump in with both feet because I saw how long it took.
Wow.
And then I bought this small business, the small app business, and I just needed the tools. So I started playing around with them. I was like, oh no, this is really different. Somebody else has already spent the $50 to $100 billion in CapEx to build a foundation model that I can just tap into as a solo entrepreneur for pennies on the dollar and go from there. And the improvement curve was just incredibly off the charts. They're getting better every day. It seems like maybe not quite every day, but every week, every month. And just never saw that with self-driving cars, right? They didn't ever have those major step function capability jumps. You're seeing it now a little bit with Tesla when they come out with new versions. They have the quantity of data and the quantity of compute to drive those kinds of things, but mostly it's been a 10-year grind to get there. And LLMs are not, for some kind of fundamental reasons, but that was what kind of unlocked the whole thing for me. And then I became, AGI pilled, as they say.
What was the moment you became AGI pilled?
The first 3 months of using the app, there was no million token context model that I could use.
Okay.
That happened like 3 months into me owning the app. And I was struggling every day to understand this spaghetti code base that I didn't write. Hours answering a simple customer question of like, what does this chart 7 screens nested deep in this complicated app mean? And what does this number mean? And I would be like, okay, I got to like trace the source code through 9 layers of logic and try to understand what this means. And then the 1 million token context thing came out and I exported the entire source code, put it in and started asking it questions like that. And it did in 90 seconds what I was spending 2 to 3 hours a day doing pretty frequently.
That had to have just blown your mind.
Yeah. I mean, I have like a Slack message that I sent to Buddy. I was like, I got to show you this. This is mind blowing. The quality of the answers, the completeness of the answers was just incredible. 8 or 9 months later, I read this essay series called Situational Awareness by Leopold Aschenbrenner.
Saw that. Yeah.
And went, pour through the 120 pages of it. I was like,
that thing went crazy.
Yeah. I actually missed it when it first came out. I didn't read it until, I don't know, October or something like that. It came out in June. So I was like 5 months too late. Reading it 6 months later was maybe even more compelling because the number of things that were like predicted in that had just happened in the last 6 months. Like I read it right after O1 came out, the reasoning model. And it was like, okay, this captures in a quantitative and kind of semi-rigorous way, but what my lived experience is, which is the trend line of this stuff is amazing. It's very different than self-driving cars. You plot that out and you have conviction about where it's going, which I do, then it's, superhuman capabilities and, single-digit years away.
Amazing.
That was the...
When did the switch flip for you that this was not a lifestyle-y type of opportunity? It wasn't going to be just a couple... a handful of apps, but this was going to be like a potentially huge opportunity.
So I had this problem on a daily basis, which was mostly what I needed to do was run this golf app that I bought because that was how I paid my family's bills. Yes. But what I really wanted to be doing was going deep down the AI rabbit hole and spending all my time doing automation work and figuring out how to extract the maximum out of the model. And but I had normal businessy stuff, and there's this automation J curve where when you first try to automate something, you're a lot less productive in doing it because supervising a robot that doesn't do something well is higher effort than just doing it yourself. And so every day I would be like, I so want to invest in doing this thing, but I need to just go like send my marketing stuff or whatever, or like, do whatever it was to grow the business. And I got to the point where I was like spending all my spare time reading situational awareness, spending all my spare time driving, listening to podcasts. What would it look like in order to build a business around the automation bit being the thing that needs to happen? That's the thing that I need to be doing every day to grow and build a business. And the answer to that was build a company that generates revenue and returns by being the best in the world at automating things in software businesses.
How do you activate that though? Because that literally flips your entire worldview on its head, right?
Yeah.
One morning you're running this golf app and all of these tools are in service of that. And now it's...
The next steps are starting to think about like, how much of what has to be automated generalizes to different products, right? Is this a thing that is specific to this golf app and it's only for this golf app, or is this a thing that I could do on any software product? Or and the other side of that is, how do you select businesses that have that common surface area so that you get the highest upside of your automation effort in any one area? And so if I look at this golf app, most of it was normal software business stuff. It's like customer support. Every business has to do that. Product management, product development, fixing bugs, responding to feature requests, marketing content, finance and accounting, although that's less my focus. That's sort of not customer facing, but necessary. There was maybe 1 or 2 workflows in the golf app that are golf specific that were annoying to me, but I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to make those happen more efficiently. But most of it was, okay, this customer support thing that uses source code as context as the way to generate a much better customer support answer for something, that's a thing that generalizes to any software system, right? That's how the kind of portfolio construction idea came up, is like, well, it doesn't work for every business. Like, I can't go buy a local laundromat or something and do this, but what if it was just SaaS businesses? Those are all pretty similar. Or what if it's just SaaS businesses that have certain types of attributes, meaning like they're high customer count, low ACV businesses that don't do high touch sales, and they don't have like a software enabled aspect to their business. What they're actually doing is building a little bit of software, but they have like a huge team of actuaries doing insurance work on the side. Like, that's a different thing. That was the thinking around that time. And I was writing these essays for David Perel's class, and it forced me to just kind of think about what are the second and third order implications of this experience that I just had building this product and operating it, trying to operate it in this way. And there was so much potential there that was unrealized that it was frustrating to me as a product person. I mean, like, the raw intelligence is here. The products that are built on it today to create this like high level of automation are still like here. And I could see the path from here to here because I had built self-driving cars and I know how to turn that crank to get to this.
That's such a flex.
And I just couldn't, like, it was so frustrating that no product was doing that thing that I wanted as the person who's trying to run a business with a high degree of automation. So build the thing.
I would imagine one of the early instincts, though, was to just say, I can build this solution through a composite of existing solutions.
Yeah.
I can go pull on these APIs, or I can go buy this software. I can kind of like patch it all together, and it's going to do exactly what I need it to do.
Yeah,
was that the first instinct?
Yeah.
And so how did that play out?
My initial instinct was, I'm a solo entrepreneur running a small software business. I have no business building my own custom AI workflows. I should just be turning on the SaaS tools that do this one by one.
Right.
And so 3 months later, or 2 months after I bought the app, Intercom launched their AI customer support agent. And I was thrilled because the app had Intercom in it already. I was like, great, this is going to solve my problem. I won't spend any more time on customer support. I turn it on.
It didn't solve all your problems?
It didn't solve all my problems. In fact, it created more problems than it solved because I had so many customers I had to follow up with and say, that answer that my automated support pod just sent you is totally wrong. I'm sorry about that. Here's the real answer. I think Intercom is a great product for traditional customer support, but where it disconnected from my needs was I didn't have a big team of normal customer support people writing knowledge base articles and documentation and all of this.
Is that normally what feeds
That's
the
what
agents?
feeds the agents, right? So I couldn't get that high level of performance out of it. So it was basically useless to me. I turned it off, 2 weeks later. It's like, this is worse than me just answering manually at this point. And there was no path to me where I could drive that feedback loop in a way that was low enough effort for it to make sense. So the answer could have been, I'm going to go write 100 knowledge base articles and do that. But I didn't have the time to do that. So I was super bummed about it. And that was the other moment where it's like, okay.
Was that like a gut check where you're like, wait, this is either going to be like way harder than I thought it was?
I was like, okay, I'm going to spend most of the next year, answering questions about how this golf app works.
Right, exactly.
Or I can hire somebody. That experience led me to this question, which is, why do you need knowledge base articles in the first place? The knowledge base article describes how the product works, right? That's what's in there. It's a bunch of handwritten, curated things that say, for this, if you want to do X in the app, here's A, B, and C steps to do it. What is the ground truth for how a software application works? If you were just to take that from like first principles, would you say that the ground truth has to be written by a human, or is the ground truth actually the code that drives the app and the data that is user specific that creates diverging behavior within that system? And that was the unlock in my brain of, okay, there should be a way to do this that doesn't involve me writing a bunch of knowledge base articles, because this information is encoded in a 100,000 line source code repository.
Right.
Why can't I just do that? And so I tried to just export the source code into a text file and put it in Intercom, but it
worked amazingly.
It's just
right out of the gate.
It's not meant to take 1 million tokens. It's meant to take knowledge base articles. It just wasn't the way that it was set up. And then I spent a while trying to figure out how to get my own Google Gemini API open, requested early access to the 1 million token model, finally got it, dumped that into Gemini and did it. And I was like, boom, It worked.
What was the output that suddenly you had that you could feed to
The output was an example. The initial workflow that worked really well was a customer would write in asking, how does this particular feature in the app work? Please explain it to me like I'm not understanding this data. And the old version of this was me doing 3 hours of like browsing source code to explain how this works. Gemini, you ask it to do that and you say, please answer this user's question using the application source code, which is this giant context thing.
Yeah.
And here's an export of their production data from the database. Answer their question using source code as ground truth and explain an example using their data to explain how the app works in this particular scenario. And the output was like this amazingly nuanced, very clear. It's like talking to the founder of the company who wrote all the code who answers your question rather than a stupid robot.
Your mind must have just suddenly started racing with possibilities, no?
Yeah, that was
probably like some degree of relief. Like, okay, it didn't play out exactly how you'd hope, but man, it seems like that's even better.
For me, as somebody who likes to build things, it was like, okay, now I have an excuse to be building things on the API. It's not just consuming things that other people make, but the benefit was really real, and that was the first step towards, okay, there's something going on here where the models are highly performant, but the way they're being integrated into some surrounding systems is like just fundamentally wrong or not optimal in some way. And I think, why did I think about it that way? It was because of having this experience of building other large-scale systems and the importance of data and thinking about things of like, what is the ground truth that creates the ultimate outcome from a data perspective that you're looking for? If that's what's happening here, the intelligence is here, the products are here, and what helps close that gap is iteratively investing in custom workflows and extracting all of the data. What is the business model that manifest that?
Because it feels like that introduces this crazy fork in the road for you as an entrepreneur. I would imagine your mind is saying, the original plan, I have one software company today, I want hundreds of these now down the road, and I'm going to have a holding company for those. Or I could just go build this infrastructure and apply it, go sell it as a stack or a solution or something, right?
Yeah, I thought for a couple of days about building an intercom competitor. That was my first product idea.
Yeah,
like maybe that's the right thing.
Sure.
And
then you can have your lifestyle-y thing over here, and you got your
like intercom for solo entrepreneurs is a product that should exist in the world. I hope somebody builds it. Being on the other side of it, it was like okay, let's imagine that I built that product and what it needed in order to be best performance would be to ask everybody who uses it to upload their entire source code base into it, and then to eventually put all their financial data in it and all their user data. Is that a product that people are going to be willing to buy?
Well, the way pitching it like that, here, take it all. What else do you want? You tech guys, I can trust you.
Right, yeah. My sense was like, that would be a very high friction sale, and the process of trying to go to market with a product like that would be very difficult. I'm a technologist who likes to build things, not a person who likes to do sales. So any way in which I can use technology as a lever to do more building of technology and less versions of me convincing other people, to do this thing felt like the personally aligned version of this.
So recursive. I don't want to sell software, so I'm going to buy software and I'm going to be my own customer and sell.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, but I felt like there are kind of two things from missing to make the products like these work at very high levels of efficiency. One is the data unlock. The other is this outer loop of optimization where you start at a relatively low level of performance, but you progressively invest the effort into every time the model does something wrong, capturing what went wrong, what was the data that went into that, what is the data that's coming out of that, what is the nature of that failure mode, and building up this kind of really robust ontology of here's the different scenarios in which it fails. How do you get the data to solve those failures and burn down that? That's an extremely high effort process that is this J-curve problem, which is if you want to get there, your productivity looks like this. And it feels really bad when you're in this zone. And if you're a person who's just doing their normal job and like you're responsible for giving your boss a deliverable or something, the chances that you make it all the way through the bottom of that J-curve and over to the other side are pretty low, I think, because at every step of the way, it feels like I've just sunk 15 minutes of this thing and it's not working. And now I've sunk 2 hours in it and I'm still not getting what I want. And now I've tried this 3 times and I'm still not happening. That was unlikely to be a product experience that most people wanted to go through, unless you are like me and you've seen what happens when you climb out of that J curve, right? Self-driving cars are finally out of that J curve, and you get amazing superhuman outcomes if you get there. So the opportunity was unlocking the data, building the systems that orchestrate that like continuous improvement loop, because most vertical AI SaaS tools don't have that. They don't have that like, hey, the model did something wrong, please track this for me. Like that outer loop feedback is not a product feature that exists in most of these tools. I have an unpublished essay about how important supervised mode is for these products. And that's like
What's the gist of that one?
The gist of that is that the way that you get to superhuman performance is by starting with less than human performance levels and progressively iterating in a data-driven way to higher and higher levels of performance. And supervised mode is what allows that to happen. It's the human in the loop that captures the edge cases that aren't working yet and allows them to be not catastrophic in the case of self-driving cars, or not bad for business in the case of a customer support system that sends bogus emails. Like, it was enormously annoying to me that Intercom didn't have a human in the loop mode where it was just on or off.
Not even an option, just a toggle.
It was just they have like a test mode where you can put your own queries in, but once you turn it on, it's like it's running. That doesn't make sense if you are not kind of building it from the first principles of an AI self-improvement system. Human in the loop mode that allows you to capture the places where the model fails, but protect against the downsides of letting that out into the world, is the thing that unlocks that continuous improvement cycle to get to the top without a bunch of bad things happening along the way. So you need to build a system that has that as like a first-class experience and captures all of that data. And you need to be willing to invest in climbing that performance curve to get to the 100x improvement in efficiency. And I just felt like not that many people are going to be willing to do all 3 of those things. But I believe, because I've seen how this works in other domains, and I know that it's possible to get to those high levels of performance. So what would be the structure of a business where I could bet on that as a thing that happens that's worth doing?
Have you figured out what that structure is yet? What does that look like?
It's a vertically integrated software holding company that builds its own technology platform for automating software products, and then buys the businesses that operate on that platform and integrates them.
Is there a profile of a business that fits squarely into that platform, and maybe the counterfactual of the thing that doesn't fit well?
SaaS businesses are my focus, so I'm not working with e-commerce or other types of digital, software-enabled businesses. The types of businesses that work well in this model are they're software businesses where most of the job of running the business is the normal software business types of things: product development, customer support, sales, marketing, the kind of common things where people regularly move between B2C businesses, B2B software products, and they can transfer that knowledge across those things. And I think AI models and agents can do that too. So it doesn't matter as much your sector focus, but it does matter that you don't have a very big part of your business that depends on a very specific domain function like actuarial services or something like that. That's not a normal software function.
Sure.
There's some future version of a cluster of businesses that get unlocked by that. And when when I'm looking for the next growth opportunity in the portfolio and I say, okay, now it's time to go automate actuarial services, then, that's not today. That's probably not next year. Maybe that's 5 years from now or something. So it's the workflows that matter, because what you're doing is you're investing a high upfront fixed cost to develop very high performance workflows across all of the key actions that you need in a software business. And the analogy here is it's like self-driving cars. Self-driving cars need to do maneuvers. Like for a long time, cruise cars couldn't do left turns, right? Turns out that's a pretty inefficient way to drive around a city. So it's hard to make a product that's great if you can't do left turns. Good timing on the Waymo here.
Perfect timing.
Right? So you had to go through this pain of these systems. You want to focus on the automatability of the maneuvers where the ROI of those is the highest, meaning they can be generalized and applied to a lot of different businesses. And
is there a corresponding depth to the J curve in terms of value created on the other side of it? You hit customer service first, you've lived through that J curve, you're now enjoying the exponential other side of that curve, I don't know, finance or with product management or some other component of that?
Yeah, I'm still climbing the hard part of the J curve for the other modules I would call, or workflows. The things that I think are really high potential, like my roadmap for kind of automation, is product management is next on the list of. If you buy a business and it has hundreds or thousands of customers, that's another selection criteria for me, is high customer end count is better, even if it's at the cost of lower ACV, because it gives you that experimental surface area and that data that feeds an automated product development process. So I've got dozens of customer questions, and I have a high enough volume that when people cancel and I ask them, why they canceled, I get reasonable data out of that, and I can drive a quantitative feedback loop around what are the highest impact things to work on from a product development perspective. And the workflow that I want to exist, the tools don't do this yet, but it's something that has a continuous kind of parsing function of all these customer support emails. It's constantly figuring out what are the highest impact things, what are the things that people are complaining the most about or citing the most in their cancellation reasons. From that, you pick the top thing off of that stack every day. You use source code as context to write a well-informed spec or PRD for that, and do probably some user interface wireframes or something. You might even in the middle there share that wireframe with a couple customers who asked about it. So like the manual version of this is like, hey, I just mocked this up. Could you react to this for me, right? You should be able to do that with a model that passes it back, takes that feedback again, builds that feature in the app, maybe in 10 different variations in code, because it's actually pretty cheap to do that. Integrates that into the product and creates a split test where you ship that new feature out to a small subset of the users in 10 different ways, measures their churn or their impact on subscriber conversion rate, and then you decide which one of those 10 different variations am I going to ship. Is it any of them? Is it none of them? That kind of probabilistic approach to product development is like, the line of sight for that is so clear. The tools are not there to connect the dots on that, but it's a data problem. It's a workflow integration problem. It's not a raw intelligence
But today,
problem.
now you look and see, you're not going to look to find the tool to fill that gap. You're saying, okay, that's my opportunity.
At every one of these things, the first thing is like, you have to change your mindset from thinking, how do I, the normal question would be, how do I hire a human to solve a bottleneck for me? If I can't do this myself, how do I hire somebody? The new version of this question is, how do I hire an AI agent or something to do something for me at every bottleneck?
Right.
And then the second order question on top of that is there an existing tool that I can use that does this, or do I have to build my own workflow? And there's a product management tool that does just the extraction piece of hooking up to intercom and pulling that out. It's called Craftful. There's a couple other that do similar things, but they're just doing that one layer of it, and they expect that a human is sitting there using the interface. It's not built in this end-to-end kind of stitch all of the pieces together kind of workflow. So that one's probably one that I'll build. I might use Craftful just for the front end of that step, and then the next step after that, if it doesn't exist yet, have to build it if it's high enough ROI, which this one is. Marketing is another one that is super high potential, where right now I'm working on, it's starting to be golf season again, so it's the right time to advertise a golf app. I'm looking at a marketing strategy that is automated short form video content for B2C mobile apps. TikTok is one of the best places to do user acquisition these days by a very significant margin, and you need good short form video to do that. So my version of this is, there's another YC startup called Viva Labs that is working on short form video content generation. And so I give them the kind of raw data of my app, like here's the feature description, here's the existing graphical assets that I have, here are screenshots, and they're turning that into a short form video that includes an AI generated avatar that is speaking on a bunch of different script variations. They do the editing to put in screenshots and things like that, and we'll test a bunch of different variations of short form video and see which one does the best.
Right.
Kind of, again, probabilistic, right? Probably every one of those things won't be great, but if you can generate 100 of those videos for just a couple bucks a video, instead of doing it the old-fashioned way, which is paying a production house $10,000 to give you 5 videos, you're eventually going to come out a winner on the other side of that,
right?
If you're experimenting enough,
and it gets you closer to your original promise or stated goal of $1 billion one-person software company, right? If you could, if you're having those AI tools generate videos, I would imagine these aren't like avatar looking, these are like realistic looking,
one of them is going to be me, actually. I went out on a golf course and recorded some video of myself
No
walking
way.
around,
Okay.
speaking 10 minutes of audio, and that's the input for a video avatar that can look like me and sound like me and can take any script and test. Instead of going out there and spending 5 hours recording, you know, a dozen different scripts of different videos, I'm going to record myself in a format that allows the avatar to be generated, and then I'll generate, or Viva Labs in this case, will generate the 20 different variations of that script and test it.
I remember seeing your announcement, and it seemed like it was a Rorschach test. Like, what kinds of responses did you get from it? And maybe like explain your intention with that kind of manifesto you put out there.
The point of the manifesto was to convey a perspective on what I think is possible if you're willing to go to the links that I'm talking about to build these highly automated systems. And I wanted to make it clear that I think what's possible already is not just kind of marginal efficiency gains, but very high levels of automation if you're willing to take it
To go there.
to go there. And I think the reactions were interesting. They fell into a couple groups. One was, "You're crazy. Have you used these models lately? Like, they're nowhere near human level of performance."
Saw those, yep.
And it's like, okay, well, yeah, the base model, if you just take it and build something on top of it that is kind of one-shotting it or doesn't have this feedback loop, it's true. That's part of the opportunity, is that the raw intelligence is there, but its applicability to very specific tasks, they need to be kind of guided in a way, right? And the other response was, I also, people were like, this is not going to happen, you know, AGI or even like much better models.
And these were like AGI insiders or AGI skeptics general. Like, these were people who were using the tools and saying like, look, I use this stuff too, like, settle down.
Yeah. Well, like, what tools are you using differently? Because I'm not seeing this, right? The people who are users and practitioners of the tools are like, okay, yeah, I agree that the tools are not there yet, and that's part of the problem, and that's part of the opportunity.
Yeah.
The other reaction was, we're years, like decades, 10 years away from this being a reality. You're too early. And I just sent those people the link to situational awareness and said, go spend your weekend reading this and come back and tell me what you think.
Right.
Another flavor of reaction was, you're a terrible person. You're going to ruin the economy.
Yes.
Everything bad is going to happen. It's like, well, even if I successfully destroyed the entire SaaS economy, that's really only like 0.5% of the US GDP. So I think, that's a little doomsday-ish. But, if you're working in a software company today and you're not using these tools every day to figure out how to make yourself more productive, like, I think you're in trouble one way or another, whether my company exists or not.
If it's me who's taking down, we have bigger problems.
Yeah, if one guy in his home office can destroy the economy, then we've calibrated our safety settings on these models all wrong.
I would imagine that you were like a single point that they then extrapolated from to say, like, if this works for him, this actually delivers on all the fears we have for AGI in general, right? That it's going to take all the jobs, that one person can do the job of thousands.
Yeah, a kind of massive acceleration of doomsday scenario
for sure.
And job loss.
Would you respond to how? Like, how do you process that?
I think they're on a 10-year time horizon. The labor market is going to look really different. I think it takes quite a long time for that technology to diffuse. It'll happen faster in software than it has in other places. Like, when I first started working on self-driving cars, like, there was this massive, like, what are all the drivers going to do? What are the truck drivers going to do? What are the Uber drivers going to do? And, here we are almost 10 years later, and that hasn't really been a problem yet. Mm-hmm. It'll be a while before it's a problem. It might eventually be a real problem, but the diffusion of these technologies, I think, take a lot longer in most cases. In my scenario, for my company specifically, the goal is to accelerate the diffusion of the technology by integrating, but the overall impact is constrained to just one company. And part of the vet here is that most companies are actually not going to do this, that it's going to take a lot longer for them to do this because it's organizationally challenging and politically difficult, and it's going to take time for the kind of diffusion curve to get out there. One outcome is like everybody loses their jobs. That seems unlikely to me to happen very quickly. the other outcome is hiring just kind of stops. Like companies just don't grow their teams anymore, and they just continue to get compounding results on the basis of whatever team they're approximately at right now as this stuff diffuses organically throughout the business. That seems more likely, I think, because that kind of like the laws of organizational physics and politics are kind of in favor of not making giant changes very quickly.
Starting to rear its head already. Like if you look at your batchmates in YC, or if you look at your other peers who are doing startups, even if you contrast your experience at Cruise with now, like the amount of progress you're making as one, versus like the amount of progress they were making with, I don't know, hundreds?
Yeah, it's real already in the sense of the hiring just isn't happening at anywhere near the pace. It's no longer a badge of honor to say I grew headcount, double or triple year over year for the last 2 years. It's like how lean can you be is the new strategy. What does that mean for people out there? I think it means if you're coming out of school or you're junior in your career, you need to find an entry point into the market that doesn't expect that there's this massive pool of junior software engineering jobs that are coming out there, and you need to be a builder, right? It's getting harder and harder to be employed by a company as a junior software engineer, and it's getting easier and easier to launch your own stuff as a software engineer without a ton of experience. So the competency and like effort has to shift in a different direction.
But what that typically meant for kind of the last generation of founders was that they would raise a lot of money, build those big teams. Are you seeing any of your peer set reconsidering how they're thinking about funding and scaling these things?
The role models in the startup business today are the companies that are growing to 10 million, 100 million ARR on very small teams. It's the minimum, what is the smallest team you can have to get there, and don't go any bigger than that. So there's no longer, it used to be you measured progress in startups, you have all these like vanity metrics, and one of those vanity metrics used to be headcount.
Yeah.
And I hear zero mention of headcount as a vanity metric that people are optimizing for these days.
Amazing.
Which is probably healthy for all the businesses, right?
Absolutely.
That was never like the right thing to optimize for.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what is the team that gets you the impact that you
No,
want
that's
to have?
definitely one of the bets we made with Indie, is that there was going to be a meaningful shift in the way people build today based on like lived experience, because it was one thing to hear it, to debate it. It's another thing to live it when you've 2 or 3x overhired for where the business actually is, and then have to like manage the complexity of all that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like live with unwinding a lot of that when you wake up and realize like you're not getting the efficiency out of all the extra heads. It's slowing you down even.
Or there's like an external market shift, right? Like my last job before doing this, I was a VP of product and engineering at a startup that rode the ZERP growth curve of lots of companies growing very fast, and their core customers were like unprofitable startups that when that growth curve, they weren't themselves like a ZERP phenomenon. They were a second order ZERP phenomenon, and that demand evaporated, and the company had to go through 3 rounds of layoffs in a year. And it's not good for anybody either, right? It's very disruptive.
Was there any reaction to the manifesto that made you like pause or reconsider?
An interesting reaction to the manifesto was people publicly being unwilling to talk about it and privately sending me messages saying, this is awesome, you're totally right, I believe this.
Yeah.
So there's like a say the quiet part out loud kind of dynamic here of like, there's a very significant undercurrent of how do you squeeze the most efficiency out of anything these days. People that would send me messages and say, that was really cool, I'll post it on my pseudonymous account.
That's hilarious. They didn't want to be seen publicly endorsing it. Why do you think that is?
Because there's kind of a
is it the political
PR risk, a brand risk of being associated with something that's efficiency. It's also it's hard even now to talk about efficiency without attaching yourself to a certain set of political point of views. That's not where I came from this. I'm just interested in building efficient things, and I've always been a person where like if something takes longer than it should to do, it bothers me that I have to keep doing it in that inefficient way. So I'm naturally oriented towards this, but it is in the current climate, there's like a lot of baggage attached to that.
Is the genie out of the bottle? Are we ever going back to building the way we've built in the past?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think, will it ever be cool again to have giant teams of people doing things that you could do much more efficiently in another way, that seems unlikely, but there's always the like throwback kind of like, you know,
they're like
well,
the vinyl album of startups.
Yeah,
so they're
there's there's a certain types of businesses that are successful on doing things an old-fashioned way.
Yes.
Craftsmen, like handmade crafts and things like that, they have a place in the world where it's like, this is a very bespoke thing. There's somebody put a lot of time and attention to making something by hand when they could have done it mechanically. And I think there will be probably a long tail of businesses that have that kind of approach. Maybe even
in software, you'll have the bespoke software, you'll have the luxury software.
Yeah, you already sort of see that. There's like premium apps. You know, like I pay for a podcast app called Overcast that's made by Marco Arment, because I just think it's well made, right? And that's a different case because he's a one-man show. The craftsmanship piece of software doesn't necessarily require you to be inherently inefficient. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be in vogue again?
No. I think the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to draw parallels, but I also just think we're entering this completely unknown. And so maybe there's a throwback where people are like, I want handcrafted software, but it's going to be so niche. It's going to be... It will be like a lifestyle-y type of business. Like Marco's a one-man shop, and he can build like little one-off things, and people attach a quality level to it, in part because there's real quality there, and in part because they really like what he's putting into the world and want to support someone who's doing that. So I think there will always be a kind of a piece for that, but it kind of gets at the question that I wonder if you wrestled with, which was, this was originally designed to be kind of a supplemental. I don't even know if you ever thought of it as like a full-time thing, that you were going to kind of buy this software stuff, automate it, have that kind of running in the background of $10K a month, $20K a month, $50K a month. That's going to like generate, throw off some cash for you. You
passive income.
Like check in. Yeah, you'll have like some passive income thing, and then you'll go do like a real startup, right? or whatever.
Yeah.
Like how have you navigated that? Because it feels like you said, there's certainly one way to approach this where you just keep it all to yourself.
Yeah.
You keep it very quiet. You quietly buy these things. You automate them. And you generate cash flow for yourself, and yet here you are, YC, making all this trouble and noise on the internet.
Yeah. One other interesting reaction to the post was, okay, but what are you going to do when the AIs take your job? And I'm like, I'm going to go ride my mountain bike and go trail running and hang out with my kids. Like that sounds like a great outcome. As soon as that can possibly happen, sign me up. The interesting thing about that is like, there's a portion of the population that like the difference between being an owner of an asset like that and being an employee is not totally obvious. It's like, if you are the owner of an asset that gets heavily automated, life is good, right? If you are the employee that gets automated away, that's not good for you. So what does that mean for people who are in this spot? It means you want to be an owner of something, right? And for me, that was like, if I can own this thing and it gets automated, that's great for me. Could I do this as a small thing and then just have it be kind of like the side, the passive income, small business? I think that will be possible someday at a smaller scale. But today the technology isn't quite there yet. That like, if I could have jumped into this business and had all the automations just work with off-the-shelf products, that probably would have been the trajectory. Yeah,
I would imagine if you did and it was pretty easy, you would have stayed on that cash flowy path, right? Because you wouldn't have had all the friction that you've had to experience.
We're not there yet, and that leaves an opportunity to build something kind of new to the world that motivates me. To be honest, I thought about like, okay, let's imagine a world where I have like passive income. What would I be doing? I would be like, I'd probably be in my garage tinkering with AI. Let me just make that the job. and I'm going to be happy to spend the next decade plus living at the bleeding edge of that.
Well, honestly, that's one of our bets with India. Is like there's just this class of entrepreneur doesn't know how to not think big. And to be ambitious. And even though it can start with like, things that look and feel maybe not as big or not have the same kind of scale attached to it, like you'll find a way. Like your brain is just wired to find it.
And you being here in San Francisco and being in YC, it helps with that because it just forces you into a way of thinking where it's like, think less about the optimizing for 100% certainty of anything and more about but what if it works? What would that look like?
Yeah.
How big and how impactful could it be?
And what are you discovering on that thread you're pulling? Because there's probably some people who look at this and go, holding company, like, how are you going to, where's liquidity? Like, why would investors give you money?
Yeah, when I say holding company, most people think private equity fund, even though those are two very different structures. So holding company is like permanent hold, build a compounding portfolio. You don't intend to sell it. Constellation Software being the canonical example, right? They've acquired more than 500 businesses and only sold one of them, and you just keep compounding.
Only one?
Yeah, and they regret selling that one. Like, they needed some cash for something, and they say that's like the only time we did it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so they do 100.
How many of those 500 did they shut down?
They don't report on that. Okay. They're pretty cagey.
Because it's a Canadian.
It's
trades on NASDAQ or what is it? Okay.
Yeah. They don't disclose a lot,
okay,
but they do disclose, they're now up to 100 to 150 acquisitions a year, so they're on their way to a portfolio of 1,000 companies over 30-year time
Would that
horizon.
be your aspiration now?
The opportunity in this space is doing things that Constellation and private equity companies too can't do, which is buying and owning and operating a very large number of very small software businesses. So if you look at Constellation's criteria, it's like 5 million ARR minimum. If you are operating a business, you have this, in a traditional way, you have this fixed cost of, you kind of just have to have like the developer, the marketer, the customer support person, and that fixed cost base is high enough that below a certain level, it doesn't make sense and it's not profitable. But if you automate those functions, then the lower limit of what you can operate profitably gets a lot lower. And there aren't a lot of repeat buyers of software companies in the 500,000 to 5 million in ARR. And so my strategy for the portfolio is, what I think about is, how do I build a business that owns 10,000 or 100,000 of those businesses? Because there's 20 to 30,000 of those companies today. I think that in the future, there's going to be 10 times that many, and maybe more than that, because it gets a lot easier to build a small niche product. And probably what's going to happen is small niche products that are kind of better tailored for a certain subset of users are going to steal market share from big monolithic products that are less good, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so what's the holding company that's optimized for that future? It's the holding company that is built to acquire 10,000 companies or 100,000 companies. I think I could work my way up to larger levels of scale. You probably have to evolve there organically, but maybe never need to go to bigger.
But I would imagine your mind is already churning on the moment in time where you never even talk to the buyer. Like, it's literally just, you could set up a system to kind of automate the discovery, negotiation, and transaction without ever, maybe you review something, but like
review an automated deal memo and hit the approve button.
Right.
Yes, that's to get to that scale, you have to automate the operations of the business, and you have to automate the sourcing, diligence, and underwriting of a deal. What do you have to believe to think that that's possible? You have to believe that the models are good enough to do that. I believe that. I think we're already there. You have to believe that you can get that system working at a high enough level of performance to get that highly automated thing. I think, like we said, we're not there yet, but that's a line of sight. You have to believe that there's enough software companies that you can buy to do that, and there are tens of thousands of those smaller businesses out there today, and there will be more. And then you have to believe that you can do enough of those deals in order to make that strategy work in a cost-effective and profitable way, and that people want to sell you the businesses. So one of the tenets of YC is build things that people want or customers want. And one other pushback is on my company is who in the world wants a software holding company that buys, software products and automates jobs away? One answer to that is the people who built the businesses are actually interested in selling a business at some point. And it's very hard to get liquidity if you spent, 10 years and you're a small software owner and your company is sub 5 million ARR. The options for you to realize the efforts of your work are often pretty limited. And so I think a little bit about how could this company become the best buyer of software businesses in the world for that kind of person? And the thing about selling a business, any business, but also a software business, is the deal process sucks, right? It's really high effort, right? I could take that to the extreme, which is when I underwrote this first acquisition, the way that I did it is I They gave me financial reports, but I basically ignored those. I said, what I want is I want API read-only access to your Stripe account, to your Apple App Store account, to your Facebook advertising account, to the core things that drive revenue and cost in the business. And I rebuilt my own P&L for how I would run the business with my cost structure on the basis of that data, and made an underwriting decision about the valuation on that. That version is not only great for me because it's higher fidelity and more accurate, it's also great for the seller, right? If you go into they had already made financial reports, but if you go to any seller who hasn't done that and said, hey, you don't have to do any of that.
Yep.
Just hit approve and authorize on these 3 or 4 API things. I will come back to you, maybe even in like hours, with an offer of here's your upfront consideration, here's how it's going to work, here's your performance-based earnout. I'll underwrite the deal, and you can say yes or no, and we'll start this process tomorrow, right? Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of what Clearbank did with lending.
Yeah.
You're effectively doing the same thing with that.
Yeah.
That's smart.
So that's
I'm going to find a way to participate in it. Okay. I'm on the road through the end of the week, but I'll hopefully find some time to kind of get back to some clearer thoughts.
Cool.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. I like it.
Man, it's so great. I'm so glad you did this.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Thanks for being so flexible.
Sure. Do it live.
I thought that was great, honestly, like do it live.
That was nuts.
Yeah. That was like...
You guys usually take 2 hours.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alan. There's a lot of actually like very tactical and practical things that he talked about that we hope you can apply to what it is you're building. And if you're thinking or building in a similar way, hope you won't hesitate to reach out to us directly. info@indie.vc.